Welcome, new supporter, Lunar Vortex LOL. Your support is much appreciated. Hello, travelers. Boardman21 here, and today's build is the high life version of the EQ Werebear. A lot of people have been asking for this. They didn't want to play the low life or they don't have the uniques, so I spent a few days min-maxing one and going really high into the corruption to see how far we could really push it. And I have some tips and tricks for you inside of the Monolith of Fate as well that help you push higher corruption on any character. But more than that, we'll get into that later. For now, this build is still OP, and I figured why not put a build out on it, since we have had it officially confirmed that changes will be coming, and this build may not be what it is, and most likely will be nerfed or just disappear in some way. We've decided why not just go ahead and take it as far as it can go so that you can farm gear, test out the higher limits of corruption, and just see how powerful that you can get. Now, the build itself really hasn't changed. It's really a no button push. You just put charge on autocast, you charge around, everything dies. But this one's going to be based around having lots of defense, having as much life as possible, and of course dealing damage with Earthquake. And because you have so much life and so much leech, and then you have the damage reduction on top of that, it takes a lot for you to actually be killed, and therefore you can push really far, and you can do it really fast. Charging around through echoes can go extremely quickly, especially with how hard Earthquake hits. You can clear through mobs and clear through rares and the end challenges really quick. So let's go ahead and get into it, the interactions, the skills, and just how it all works. For skills, I'm running Earthquake, Werebear Form, Summon Bear, Ice Thorns, and Summon Thorn Totem. Once you get above 250 corruption, the bear is just going to die all the time. And then once you get that high, you're also going to want more survivability, more health on your idols. So you're not going to run the 1x4 for the Summon Thorn Totem proc on hit. So both of these skills are just not going to be used, and there's really no replacements for them. You're not going to run War, you're not going to do Entangling Roots. It's too much mana. So for the most part, they're just there for the early stages, and then like you'll see in my gameplay, I'm not rocking them in any of it. For Earthquake, we've got this set up so that you'll do as much damage as possible, especially against a chilled or frozen enemy, and that you'll get as many hits as possible. We're taking advantage of the fact that the weapon bypasses both mana cost and the cooldown for Earthquake while you're in Werebear Form and proccing it with a movement skill. So we have 5 points in Rupture for the initial hit damage, 1 point in Seismic Smash, which converts all Aftershock damage into initial hit damage, but you no longer create Aftershocks. We got 3 points in Crushing Wake for more Aftershock damage, which is multiplicative, but this is now converted to initial hit damage. 1 point in Seismic Tide, so that you now do 3 initial hits. This adds a cooldown, adds mana cost, but again, we bypass those with the weapon. That's why it's so popular. It just makes Earthquake actually feel good, because it doesn't cost anything to proc. And those 3 initial hits, the first one will have a reduced radius and damage, the second one will have a slight reduced radius and damage, and then the third hit will have an increased radius and damage, which is awesome because you do more damage against chilled or frozen enemies. So the first 2 hits will have a chance to get the chill applied. By that third hit, that's the really big hit that you'll do. Then we got 2 points in Concussion for more initial hit damage, as well as stun chance, 3 points in Outbreak for a huge area, the maximum area that you can hit with it, which is going to make it feel a lot better, and then 5 points in Shatterquake, so that you do 150% more damage against a chilled or frozen enemy. Again, you do 3 hits with the skill once, you'll have a lot of chill chance. You can get 40% inside of the passive tree, you can get up to 60% on an Empowered Blessing, so you can get up to 100% total on hit. But even if you have less than that, you're likely to apply it on the first or second hit, and by the third hit, it's going to hit really hard. For Werebear Form, we have this set up so that you get the increased crit chance on charge, so that you have the reduced recovery on the charge itself, so that you can charge as often as possible. We still have the 100% more damage against stunned enemies, but without the mana cost of charge, we went around the left way. And then we got into Wizened Claws, so that we could get the extra spell damage converted into melee damage and critical strike chance. So we've got 5 points in Ursane Heart. This gives us 250 flat armor and 25% increased armor. Now with the increased armor that you can also get as a blessing, or if you want to put 1 or 2 slots as increased armor on your gear, along with all the flat armor that you get between passives and on your implicits of gear, you can actually get a lot of armor in this build and be really tanky with armor. And of course you'll have your resistances, a huge amount of HP, and endurance. We got 1 point in Wizened Claws and 1 point in Star Claw. This converts spell damage For every 1% spell damage you have, you will now have 1% increased critical strike chance, as well as 1% increased melee damage. So you get to double dip out of one affix for more damage, and of course the chance to crit to do more damage with Earthquake. We got 3 points in Pummel for more melee physical damage added, 1 point in Bash for some stun chance, 2 points in Skull Crush. This gives us 100% more damage of any hit that you do while in Werebear form, Earthquake included, against a stunned enemy. Now because you're hitting so hard, it is likely that you'll stun enemies, so you will be taking advantage of this quite often. Do not put the 1 point in Overwhelm for the guaranteed stun, because it will cost mana, and you will eventually run out of mana. Then also got 4 points in Rip and Tear for that 100% increased damage and crit chance for 4 seconds after you charge. Charging multiple times within 4 seconds, this does stack. So as long as you have charge on autocast and you're just constantly charging, you're going to have a higher critical strike chance as well as much more increased damage. And then we got 3 points in Hightail, which reduces the cooldown of charge by 150%, taking it down under a 2-second charge time, which is really going to let you just charge around. Then for Summon Bear, the bear is eventually going to die. Even as a solo companion, we didn't throw much gear into it. You could snapshot it if you wanted, you know, put on all your minion gear, summon it, take all the minion gear off, then put your regular gear on. I wasn't going to go through that much more work, especially since I just wanted to zoom through the corruption and through all the monolith echoes, so I just stopped using him altogether. He wasn't doing very much for the build once we got to 200 corruption anyways, and it's annoying to resummon pets over and over again. But with him anyways, I have him set up to be a retaliation bear so that he would, you know, take a lot of hits, had a lot of life, and then he'd poison enemies as he took hits. So we got 6 points in Thick Hide for extra health, 1 point in Retaliatory Thorns, so that he'll shoot out Ice Thorns. It's not your skill Ice Thorns, it's his own. It should be called something else. But when he takes 75 damage, he retaliates by shooting out Ice Thorns. 3 points in Winged Thorns will make them go further. 1 point in Lacerating Claws gives him some more damage and bleed chance. 1 point in Thorn Bear makes it to where he'll cast Briar Thorn, which is a spell for him. If you do not give it a cooldown, he'll just sit there and constantly cast it. This is bad because you want him to be in melee range, 1, getting hit, and 2, so the retaliation thorns will actually hit things. It also reduces the threshold for retaliation for the Ice Thorns from 75 damage down to only 30. If he steps on a dot, you've probably seen how crazy and how many of the thorns shoot out. So if he dies, he's probably killing everything around him at the same time with how many stacks of poison that he shoots out. We got 2 points in Barbed Thorns, then 1 point in Ursane Endurance. This gives him increased health, but this is also what gives the Briar Thorns the cooldown. That's not the Ice Thorns, that's the Briar Thorns, which is the spell it casts. This will make it to where it will cast it once, then run into battle instead of staying out there and just casting over and over again. And then 5 points in Nightshade Bear, so both the Briar Thorns and the Ice Thorns will have a 100% chance to poison. For Ice Thorns, we have Ice Thorns set up to proc when we get hit. We've got 3 points in Dagger Thorns, 2 points in Bramble Armor, 4 points in Spell Thorns. This gives us a 40% chance when we take a hit, any hit, that we'll have a chance to cast Ice Thorns. 1 point in Anemophily, 1 point in Thorn Shield, so when we do cast it, it doesn't just shoot out the Ice Thorns, it creates a shield for 1 second, which will give us 40 extra armor. Then it will shoot out like the normal Ice Thorns would. 4 points in Bulb Shield gives us a chance to recast the Ice Thorns when it is cast from being hit, so there's a 40% chance when you get hit to cast it, and then a 40% chance on that cast for it to be recast. We got 2 points in Bark Shield for more armor, so you'll get 80 flat armor now for 1 second, and 3 points in Eternal Protection takes that 1 second duration up to 1.9 seconds. And then for Summon Thorn Totem, like I said, eventually you're going to want all health idols, but if you don't have the health idols, this is a very good replacement until then, as you will proc them. They take a little aggro, like some mobs will attack them instead of you, or stay behind to attack them, which means you won't have the whole mob chasing you. They also can block some incoming projectiles, but eventually at high corruption, they basically instantly die, just like the bear, and they're not going to be that fun. We got 4 points in Forested Expanse, 4 points in Eternal Forest, and 1 point in Grove Mine, so that we will summon the maximum amount at once, which will be 5. And then we got 2 points in Teutonic Wisdom, 4 points in Venom Tipped Thorns, 4 points in Lasting Affliction, and 1 point in Rotten Core, so that when you proc them over and over again, if you do, you'll get a whole bunch of Poison Burst, and then the Poison Thorn projectiles. You'll be doing a lot of poison, the bear will do a lot of poison. It'll just help out a little bit on trash mobs, especially early on, but like I said, once you're in Empowered, once you're in that high corruption, they're basically useless. For passives, I've got 20 points in the Primalist base class with 6 points in Gift of the Wilderness, 8 points in Natural Attunement, 1 point in Wisdom of the Wild, and 5 points in Hunter's Restoration. Now there will be points that you can take out from elsewhere, and you can put them into Berserker so that if you do get to below 35% health, you'll get that additional 30% less damage taken, which can be huge for the build, especially since if you have enough health, that threshold can be almost 2,000 life. I've got 11 points in the Beastmaster. We got 8 points in Ursane Strength to take less damage from nearby enemies. Most likely you'll charge in and then you'll take the damage, and therefore this is very big. 2 points in Boarheart so that if you do take a melee hit, you can take 15% less damage from following melee hits for 2 seconds. There is a 2-second cooldown. Eventually you'll have to be hit with a melee attack to proc it again. And then we have 1 point in Arter's Loyalty for that companion size and companion damage for a solo companion. Again, you could take this point out, especially once you pass that 150 or 200 corruption and you're no longer using the bear. You can take this point out and the other points in the Druid that also deal with the solo companion, and you can move them into Berserker so that when you do take a big hit, you'll have extra damage reduction. We got 13 points in the Shaman with 5 points in Shamanic Infusion, and then 8 points in Tempest Form. This is going to give you 1 health, but this is also that 40% chance to chill on hit, which is huge for the build. And then we got 69 points in the Druid, the Mastered class, with 6 points in Blood Claws, 7 points in Bark Skin, 8 points in Woodlore, 8 points in Spirit Claws, 10 points in Blossoming Vines, 10 points in Ursane Claws, 10 points in Hide Skin, 8 points in Ursane Maul, and then 1 point in Woodland Bond and 1 point in Natural Duality. Again, once you've not using the bear anymore, this point, and the other solo companion point, that's 3 points. You can take those 3 out and go ahead and put them into Berserker and pick 2 points from basically anywhere else that you want. I would take Ursane Claws. You can also take the Blossoming Vines. It's just going to be 20 health from here to give you that damage reduction. So for idols, items, and blessings, these aren't going to be the most perfect items because I'm not running a lot of exalted stuff. Even though I hunt for a lot of exalted, I only found like 1 perfect chest exalted item that I was using for the build. However, you can obviously throw on more exalted items with even higher health and even get more health than I have in the gameplay. But starting with the idols, basically we're running 1x2s that give increased chance or increased health along with flat health, and then some 1x1s that can cover either a resistance that you're missing. You can get some dodge rating in there if you wanted. I have a 1x3 that has critical strike avoidance on it just to cover that little bit of critical strike avoidance I needed in order to get to 100%. If you have 100% critical strike avoidance, whether you did the blessing, which I didn't do, and you have it on gear and you've just gotten it that high, or you had an exalted item with it, you don't have to run that and you can run even more health. For uniques, there is 1 unique that you need. It is the Boulder's Wrath. This is mandatory for the build, as this is what the build is completely based around. You can get this from doing the Spirits of Fire timeline. It has an 85% drop rate. It does not have to be empowered, but you're going to have a high level character to get there, as it's not something that's going to drop. Plus, you can't wear it before level 75 anyways, so you're better off making sure you have the item before you try and build this build. And then for the items, for the 1 exalted item I have, this one dropped with tier 7 vitality on it. It doesn't have the most optimal. I would like to have flat health instead of necrotic resist on it, but sometimes you just got to deal with what you got, and that vitality is a huge amount of vitality. I believe I have 23 on my item, so that's 230 flat health, which is absolutely an insane amount to go along with that increased health. I also have spell damage while transformed, and then of course basically got our necrotic resistance covered on the chest. Now I'm just going to hover over the rest of these. Of course, the build planner will be linked below, and it will be in the written guide if you'd like to take a look and mess around with it a bit. It will be in there for easy accessibility. And then for the blessings, again, just going to hover over these. Basically went for some defensive ones as well as critical strike chance. We went for some leech, and then of course we have some chill on hit. And we have our extra endurance to make sure we got the 60% endurance. If you want, you can switch these out and go with the increased armor and the flat armor, and that's going to give you a lot more survivability, as the increased and flat that you have there added with everything else that you have is likely to give you at least another 10% armor. Alright, for the character sheet, for this, we have almost capped resistances. We are a little low on cold and fire, but it's fine. It's not going to be something that gets you killed. For armor, we have almost 50%. Now, like I said, I don't have the blessings for the increased and the flat armor, but if you did, you would easily get to about 4,000 armor, which would really push you up to about 58 to 60%, which would be another 10 to 12% damage reduction of physical, and then you would have that extra 8% or so of non-physical elements, which would be even more damage reduction. Of course, I didn't have my gear set up to where I could do that, but if I do find an exalted item with endurance on it later, I'll probably make that flip. But for now, you can see on defense sides, we're just 1% shy of getting the max endurance. We have almost 1650 endurance threshold, and that's without stacking any of it. We don't have it on blessings, we don't have it on gear. All of that is because it's taking 30% of our life straight as endurance threshold, because as a druid you get that extra 10% inside of the passive tree, which is huge. Now remember, if you take berserker, that comes in at low life, which is 35%. Now this number is about 30% of our life, and berserker kicks in at 35% life. So if you take that 30% damage reduction, that will actually kick in before endurance, and then you'll have both of them basically for that whole 1700 life down, which is just a massive amount of damage reduction. It keeps you from being one shot even when the mobs have 300% more damage or increased damage modifiers, which is huge, and you just keep moving around. Then we have 110% critical strike avoidance, so we've got that covered. For damages, we only have 300% melee damage, and that is of course from the spell damage converted in. And you don't want physical damage. Remember, earthquake is changed into fire, so you want to increase fire damage. And then of course we got about 250% crit multi on this build, as we are aiming to get a lot of crits. My crit chance here on the sheet says 39%, but remember, every time you charge, that'll be increased. If you've done a crit lately, you get You're saying Maul, which gives you Ferocity, which will be even more crit chance for having crit recently. So that's going to help you have your crit chance even higher. It'll be above 50%, which is enough to where you're going to get at least one crit, basically, on average, with every Earthquake that you do. Alright, and then for skills and skill rotation, basically once you're in Werebear form, you just put charge on autocaster, you just hold it down, whatever you want to do, and then boom, you just keep moving, keep moving. Remember that since you are basically always moving on the chest piece, if you want to give up some health, you can put on the Wings of Argentis, and that will give you 40% damage reduction, as well as +1 skill level to Earthquake, since it is converted to fire. So you'll get 1 extra point for Earthquake, and then you'll get that 40% damage reduction. You'll also get haste on hit, which will help you move through. I have it. I have used it on some of the monos if it started to get difficult, but I really just liked having the health. It really wasn't necessary as long as you pick the right affixes and start paying attention to what you're doing once you get to about 400 corruption up, and you save yourself and set your map up, which I'll show you guys here in a moment, so that you can get rid of all the hard affixes or the enemy affixes before you do Orbis. You'll be perfectly fine to just continue on and keep flying through the corruption and getting higher and higher and higher. Now, it is time consuming. Getting to 600 is no easy feat. I've been playing this character for 2 weeks. I have played it for a couple hours a day, but recently, the last few days, I've had off from work. I haven't put up many videos, been kind of bored, and basically just been steamrolling through with Earthquake for like 8 hours a day for the last 3 days straight, which has been pretty boring, but it's allowed me to do some other things. Won't get into it. But for the most part, this is it. You just charge around, and you just keep going boom, 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 and everything dies. It's really just as easy as it is. For leveling this character up, you obviously can't level it as is, but you can level it as a werebear. So go ahead and follow the 1 to 75 guide I have. Just don't use Entangling Roots. I do plan on updating that guide. But again, just play it as you normally would a melee werebear using swipe. And then eventually, once you get to 75, once you have the unique, you transition over. And as soon as you put on the weapon, it just takes off. Super, super quick, super, super fast. Lots of damage and really quick clear speeds, as well as a lot of tankability. As for uniques that you can use in this build, there are a few that you can use. If you want to have more damage reduction, you will have slightly less life. You can throw on the Wings of Argentis, as I mentioned earlier. There's also the rings that you can use, which I'm really drawing a blank on the name of the ring, but the ring gives you a chance to chill on hit. That will make it faster for you to get chill on the enemy to do more damage. However, I don't recommend it. I would just stick around with having the life, but you can wear things like Ribbons of Blood, anything that gives you more health or increased health, that gives you more leech. Any of those are going to be good for the build to fill in until you find a better item. But for the most part, crafted items that have the affixes you need and give you lots of life are going to give you the greatest amount of EHP that you could get so that you can push on much easier. Alright, and now for some tips and tricks for how to get to high corruption. Now, you can basically get to high corruption with any build. It'll just get more and more painful. It's going to get slower, mobs are going to get harder, and unless you have an OP build or a build that's, top-notch, Nova Boy, Turbo Vengeance, Earthquake, Druid, Werebear, Shadow Daggers, or Shadow Cascade, unless you have a build that's really meant for dealing high damage in an area that's, fast, it's going to be the most tedious, boring thing ever. I mean, I've spent weeks, gotten to the higher corruption, and really, it doesn't do much for you. You get some more drops, maybe you get to, flex a little bit, but really, it doesn't do much for you. It was a very time-consuming thing on one character, on just one timeline, and that's really it. But there are some tips and tricks to make it easier for yourself to get there. One of them being that at some point, you're going to run into a point where you've given yourself way too many hard modifiers, and you're going to die. Now with the Druid Earthquake, it's really hard to do that. Even with the worst modifiers, giving them a whole bunch of damage, making yourself slow, giving them dodge, giving them something that's going to make your build feel really horrid, critical strike avoidance, things like that. I mean, the worst case scenario, you give them dodge, you give them critical strike avoidance, you give them a whole bunch of health, you can give rares, increased health and damage, and a whole bunch of damage modifiers to where they're hitting you hard, you're doing less damage, you give them 60% endurance. If somehow you match all those up because you weren't paying attention, one, that was really bad, you want to pay attention, but two, there are ways to get rid of them without adding in more of them. And so there are certain things that count as running echoes that are going to allow you to remove some of them. One, you can run a quest. Always save your quest for a moment when you are stuck. And if you run your quest, it will reduce some of the stability, but you don't care. It's not going to reset your web, so you're going to be able to take off some of those modifiers. The other thing you can do is save your lanterns. So for instance, here on this map that I've been running, I've saved some lanterns. I haven't quite worked myself to this one, but up top, I've saved this one. I've got another one right here ready to go. We've got another one right here that's ready to go. And what I can do is I can run those, and these don't add a modifier, but they will count as running an echo. So if you have any of these that are about to fall off, they will fall off and remove the ones that only have one run left on them. The other thing you can do is before you get to bosses, not only do you want to save lanterns to before you do Orbis so you can remove all of the affixes, you also want to save all the rares. So for instance, on this map, I've been saving quite a few. Here in the beginning, this one, the reason I haven't worked to it is because the echo to get to it is a rare affix. This one only gives rare enemies the ability to regenerate health. So literally, if I go up this way and I take that, and then I take the next one, not only am I removing a affix of enemies or dodge or whatever I've given them that's bad, I'm going to give rare enemies the ability to regenerate, and then I'm going to remove an affix. And so now even if you stack up 3 or 4 of these rare enemies regenerate health, and that's it, and then you go fight Orbis, it's going to be an easy fight because the only affix on Orbis is going to be the enemies have 200 and whatever percent based on whatever your corruption is, increased health and damage. And that'll be it. It'll be a much easier fight because you'll clear all those mods off. And then, once you reset the timeline, you get to start fresh again because all those mods have been removed. So you start building your web again based on that instead of starting with some really hard mods. So again, just to reiterate, save as many lanterns as you can, preferably about 3 of them by the time you get to the edge of the map, and save 2 or 3 rare affix mods. Either they regenerate health or something that only affects rares. Not too many of them. You can get rare enemies increased health and damage, and at this point it's a very high number. If you stack too many of those, it can get really hard to complete an echo. But getting 2 regenerate healths, 2 lanterns, and 1 increased, health and damage for a rare is going to take care of the 5 echoes. And you're going to be able to remove all the bad things. You're going to remove the enemies have increased movement and speed, have endurance, have dodge. You're going to remove all of those right before the boss fight, and it's going to make it so much easier, and it'll start you off with a nice, clean, fresh plate on your very next round of making your web. The other tip and trick you really want to do is you just want to shoot for a corner. So as you can see here, we started here, and I didn't web out too much. I did do a little building in the bottom, but that was just to unlock some rares. So if you notice down here, I've got, where did it go? Rares regenerate health, and the reason for that is so that I have that available before I do a boss fight. I can do 3 or 4 rare enemies regenerate health, and that'll make the boss fight really easy because it won't affect him. And then I'll start the next round with basically just a bunch of rares that I have to worry about. But you do so much damage with Earthquake that even if there's 3 or 4 of those affixes, rares are still going to die relatively quickly. But you'll notice for the most part that I shot just straight upwards. I went straight up, we kept going, and we're all the way up here at the lantern. I'm going to go through the lantern, we're going to build a little bit further, and we should get a corruption one that gives us 8, 9, or if we go far enough, we could go all the way up to like 12 corruption added for this push. And that's all you're going to do, and you just keep doing it over and over again. Now you do want to pay attention to your fixes for the Druid. There are some, or for the Druid Earthquake, there are some affixes you really don't want. You really don't want to give them chance to dodge. It's like the worst thing to give them. And if you give them too many things like chance to slow you on hit is a really powerful one, because the only speed you really have is charging, and then you'll just end up taking a lot more hits. And stay away from bone spirals. Those are just really, really bad. Other than those 3 things, you can usually kind of just take on everything. You can see here I have a chance to slow. I've given them increased movement and damage, increased health and damage. They take less damage at high health. Rares have a buttload of health and damage. And of course the corruption is giving them a whole bunch of more health and damage. And really haven't been struggling. Still haven't taken the Berserker node in the passives yet. I've died once or twice. But I mean, deaths are obviously going to happen. It's why we're in softcore. But again, this build could just infinitely just keep going if you got the time. Alright, that's going to be it for this build. Hope it was easy to follow. Hope this helps you push in corruption a little bit. And again, hope you guys enjoyed the High Life Earthquake. Take it while you can. It's not going to be around forever. You guys have been asking for an updated version of the High Life before it goes bye-bye. So here it is. And as always, stay safe, travelers, and enjoy some gameplay.